I'm Stephan Thoma. I've been in the talent development world for about 20 years, and latterly with Google for nearly 8 years, where I ran the Global Learning and Development team. I'd like to share some thinking and some practice around how to make sure that you have an R&D and innovation agenda in the learning and development space. So one of the things that from Google days, Google used to think about a model that it framed as 70-20-10 around resource allocation. So how it could make sure it had enough resources, whether that's money, people, machine time, brain space, in the system to focus on R&D and some of the new thinking and innovation in what it was doing. And we used that in the learning team as well. So how we thought about and created enough space for fresh thinking and new ideas and experimentation to test those things out. This is about resource allocation. So if you think about the total set of your resources, 100%, whatever that is, whether it's money or people or anything else. So the idea is that 70% should be focused on your core products, your core services, your core outputs. 20% should be focused on enhancements to those. And so 10%, you should have 10% in the system focused on R&D and on innovation. And that kind of model and that kind of thinking, as you think about your budgets, your forecasts, where you put your people, where you're spending your time, how you build your goals and your strategies, you should set that against that 70-20-10 frame. Generally speaking at Google, first of all, some of the, let's say, crazier ideas like self-driving cars or smart contact lenses, they're examples of some projects that came, some products and some thinking that came from some of that 70-20-10 resource apportionment. In the L&D space, we started with peer-to-peer learning. That was one of our 10% type projects in the early days, and then that grew as it started to get some traction and became then into the 20% and eventually into the 70%. So thinking about that 70-20-10, if you think about the 10% and where you're spending time on innovation and R&D now, as you think about the following year, then the 20% should be informed by the 10% of where you're spending your time this year. And you take that further forwards to the third year, then of course that 20% will then become part of the 70%. And so what you're ending up with is a layered kind of iterative process. So your R&D today becomes some of your enhancement work next year, which becomes your mainstream the year after. Next year's 10%, the new R&D work becomes part of the 20%. And so it layers as you go through the year. And that way you end up with almost institutionalizing the pipeline of innovation and experimentation that you're doing. Yeah, so this is about resource allocation. Then, of course, people need to be focused on the right thing. So where it becomes really powerful if you couple this kind of 70-20-10 ongoing resource allocation system with an individual goal-setting process. And a very popular methodology that's used by a lot of tech companies and West Coast companies, Google included, is OKRs, objectives and key results. So given the bigger picture, then what am I specifically going to focus on this quarter? What are the key results to go with that? And then that builds quarter over quarter, and it allows you to get the balance right between what sits in the 70, what sits in the 20, and what sits in the 10, both at a team level, but then also at an individual level too.